The equation of a circle in the xy plane is shown above. What is the radius of the circle? Let's define the equation of a circle. It has the form of x minus h in the bracket squared plus y minus k in the bracket squared equals r squared. It may look a little long and unfamiliar, but let's take our time to break it down. We'll draw a circle in the xy plane. And the very important part of any circle is radius. So let's draw the radius as well. The origin of radius is the middle of the circle. Let's define that point and give it dimensions of hk. As we know, the sequence matters in graphical representation. H is the x-coordinate and k is the y-coordinate of this point in the middle of the circle. If we decided to estimate the length of the radius, we could use the difference between x-coordinates and y-coordinates of 2 points, the middle of the circle and a point that is sitting on the circumference. We can see the right triangle forming, and we could go to the fundamental Pythagorean theorem and solve for radius. One of the legs, let's mark it blue, is the difference between y-coordinates of the 2 points. And a red line represents the difference in the x-coordinates between these 2 points. Knowing 2 legs, we know that the sum of squares of these 2 legs should lead us to the square of the hypotenuse, or the radius in our case. Let's refer back to the equation of a circle. We can recognize that the contents of the brackets x minus h represents the difference in the x-coordinate between the 2 points, and 1 minus k represents the difference in y-coordinates of these 2 points. We add the squares of both of these differences, and we arrive at the hypotenuse or radius in the squared form. This is a lot of information, so if you could reflect on this and try to see how it all connects together, that would be very helpful before we move on. Looking at the formula provided in the question, we can see that there is x squared plus y squared plus 4x minus 2y. We don't exactly see the squares inside the brackets, but we can surely create those from what we have. Let's bring together x squared plus 4x and unite y squared and minus 2y, and try to create the squared form of a binomial. Recognizing the special case of multiplying binomial comes once again very handy. So let's put one of the standard forms. Let's use variable w in this case with an x. X plus w squared is equivalent to x squared plus 2xw plus w squared. Let's refer back, and we have x squared plus 4x formed already. If we were to create a square of the binomial, we might assume that 4x equals 2xw in our case. Let's solve for w. 4x equals 2xw. And if we divide both sides by 2x, our w would be equal to 2. So if we were to create a binomial in the squared form, we would need to use 2 in place of w, which would mean that we finally get the following inside the brackets: x squared plus 4x plus w squared would be 2 squared, since we defined W as 2 as a result of our calculation. So if we were able to add 4 to x squared plus 4x, we'd be able to create an equivalent of a square of a binomial. And guess what? We can do that. Let's add 4, but also, of course, we need to add 4 on the opposite side of the equal sign to not violate the equality that we have. Let's do the same for the second bracket. We already have y squared minus 2y. And to complete the process of creating the square of the binomial, let's assume that minus 2y stands for 2yw. And if we do so, we can manipulate and divide both sides by 2y. And as a result, we get w equals minus 1. So to create the w squared, we would need to square minus 1. Minus 1 squared equals 1. So let's add 1 inside the brackets. And of course, we need to balance the equation and add 1 on the opposite side as well. Let's now convert what we have into the format of the equation of a circle. So let's replace the contents of the first bracket with its equivalent, x plus 2 squared. And the second bracket ends up being y minus 1 squared. And on the right side, minus 1 and plus 1 cancels out. We get 4. I hope you understand how we went from x squared plus 4x plus 4 form to the squared form of x plus 2 squared. And the same with the contents of the second bracket, y squared minus 2y plus 1. Ended up being in the equivalent form of y minus 1 squared. If not, please review multiplication of binomials and specifically the 3 special cases of multiplying binomials. Or maybe go slightly back in this video and it might also help you understand how it all happened. Now we have arrived at the form that is very much like the equation of a circle. And even though x plus 2 looks slightly different from x minus h form, you should not forget that the x plus 2 could be also written as x minus negative 2. So it is actually pretty equivalent. Now let's focus on the right side. We know at this point that r squared in our formula is actually 4. So since the question asks about the radius of the circle, let's focus on this and find what the radius would be. If radius squared equals 4, radius equals 2, our answer choice is A.